Lagos. I hope we have, I guess the video, we're recording with camera with the video there, right? So we haven't lost all of the delivery. So this is just for Zoom, yeah? Yeah, okay, thank you. And it's also important to look at how Lagos has emerged. So Lagos, like he said, really emerged as a commercial destination. And so perhaps these are some of the reasons why we need to think about how it's still emerging and how we can see its future emergence. And perhaps look at how other cities are also addressing their remaking. Because one thing is for sure, urban growth is certain. So as we learn, we need to plan and build, and we also need to reflect more livability, having scenarios where, like he mentioned, that 30 people to a room, etc., really puts to question a lot of what we mean about development and Lagos as the center for the future and the center of excellence. But it also brings us to think about well-being, how we look at public spaces. You know, I look at estates nowadays, and really it's about the volume and how many buildings they can put in a space, as opposed to how the residents can really live in an estate and have spaces to enjoy what is provided to them. And so it's the responsibility, like you mentioned, of the architects, but different people across the ecosystem and the value chains to see how well we can work together. And so the question is, what is the future? Where is the future? How do we really diagnose what the problem is and where the future needs to go to? Or is it a dead end? I don't know. The question also is that to what extent are the new developments learning from the older developments? And how are we bringing these lessons and applying them to address these challenges? But more importantly, it's the question of how do we solve the problem of these times before we even start to think about the problems of future times. So can we please give him a round of applause again? Because really, honestly, it was short, but it was very succinct. And it was also very powerful. And I think that perhaps, you know, now he has a different role now that he has retired. He's really into documenting, like I mentioned earlier, history. And he shared he has a book that he has written, which I will plug. And it's The Life and Times of Engr, and it's looking at a family story within the history of Nigeria. It's his own personal family, and looking at his father, and looking at how his grandfather, his father, and the trajectory to today. And I think it's very interesting and also a privilege that we can have someone like you who can share with us the perspectives of the older generation, i.e. you looking at the generations before you, and also then seeing how we can learn from that today. So as you can tell, I'm a huge fan. Anyway, without much ado, we're going to go on to the next session, which is a panel session that will be looking at some of the questions that he has raised, some of the comments that he has raised. And we have a very distinguished and stellar panel that will be sharing over the next 30 minutes to 45 minutes, some of their own reflections, and then we will have time for questions afterwards and also more engagement, because I'm sure you will also have questions that you would like to ask Engineer Adeola. So, the session is going to look at making Lagos, and we have our moderator, who I will also please call onto the stage. She's Miss Aduke Gomez. Please, can you give her a round of applause? Thank you. I'll just read her profile as she comes up. She's a member of the advisory board for Open House Lagos, and she's a lawyer, and she utilizes her legal and advisory skills to address and achieve business development and creative development in Nigeria. She started her career in law with the firm Udo Udoma and Bello Sage, and she has worked in various leadership roles with EcoBank Nigeria and Leadway Pension. She was appointed by the Governor Fashola administration in the role of Senior Special Assistant to the Lagos Hotel Licensing Authority. And she was also appointed to serve as a member of the Lagos State History Committee and as a member of the Lagos Carnival Committee. She has now also been combining her interest in Nigerian history with her work as a consulting producer. And she's worked on several books, including Journey of an African Colony, that was published by Kuramo Productions, and they also did a documentary. She has also published her own collection of poems, as well as several other books that she has published. So she is an author, she's a lawyer as well, and a history lover, I guess we can call her. So please give her another round of applause. And I would like to re-invite our keynote speaker back onto the stage because he's going to be part of the panel discussion. And I've already introduced him for those of us that came in late or later because of traffic and the challenges of Lagos that we're trying to remake. He's Engineer Bayo Adeola, who is the chairman, CPMS, and also he is an author. and he is a consulting engineer as well. And thirdly, last but not the least, I would like to introduce our third panelist to come and join us. He is Kelechi Anabaraonye. Is that correct? Sort of. Please, yes, please. So please, apologies for that. I did try to practice, but Kelechi studied. Please come up to the stage and please clap for him. Thank you. He studied political science at the University of Lagos and is an experienced local historic architecture tour guide. And he has a penchant for Nigeria's colonial history, interested in historic building restoration and conservation and regeneration. He writes on individuals and architecture from colonial times, preferring solutions in preservation and restoration, and has been featured across different platforms, local and international, including Arise TV, Culture Custodian, Guardian Life, Ventures Africa. He's also a photographer, a historic architecture photographer, and photos of his historic buildings have been featured as well in different publications. So good evening and welcome to the panel. Thank you. So we have about 45 minutes for this conversation, and then we'll have questions from the audience. And for those of you joining online, please, if you do have questions, could you type them in? And once you've typed them in, I will get them, and then I can read them out to the moderator to also ask this. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome, Mr. Adeola, and welcome, Mr. Anabaraonye. Did I get that? Anabaraonye. Okay, thank you very much. Before we begin, can I just ask if your slides are, if your pictures are available? Yes, no? Okay. I just like his pictures to be up because I think that, yes, so they can be flashing so that we can remember how Lagos used to be. Okay, thank you. I think what I'd like to, first of all, start with Kelechi and ask him, you're not of the generation that saw the buildings that you collect alive. I mean, I can just about remember some of them, and Mr. Adeola is like race course. I have a little memory of race course. I'm sure you can remember the horses going around and going for the races. But to you, you just know the parade ground. What made you decide that you wanted to document this history?
Good evening, everyone. I would say it all started when I was trying to get into secondary school. I did an exam for St. Gregory's. I grew up as a Roman Catholic, and I wanted to go to St. Gregory's. There was a particular bust of a European priest, which is still standing in the school compound. So I was quite fascinated with the bust and also the science laboratory buildings. I didn't go to St. Gregory's. Also, fortunately, I went to King's College. And while at King's College, I think it was sort of an unconscious attraction to me. My school's buildings are historic. They were designed and constructed by the Public Works Department, which we have, if in our day now, Federal Ministry of Works and Housing and Infrastructure. It was designed then by the PWD, and then people usually say British colonial style, but if you take a deeper look, it's actually neoclassical architecture. And but because of the fact that we were colonized by the British, so people try to use British colonial architecture. And then the buildings were quite fascinating. There's the administrative building, which is in exposed burnt bricks. Burnt bricks was the major building material that was used at that particular period. And then you have the laboratory buildings and so many others, basically. So I think in the course of my study at King's College, I was kind of like just attracted. I lived in Surulere. I still live in Surulere. And then I was like, oh, why are the buildings in Surulere kind of like different from the ones in Lagos Island. I had friends as well who are Afro-Brazilians, Agudas. I had the Pinheiro, Da Silva, Pereira. And I was also like, what's with the son names? Why are you guys trying to like, form another bomb? In the course of my research.
Thank you very much.
I literally found out that, yeah, these people there's so much history behind them, basically. So I think in the course of studying in King's College, I just had this unusual attraction to the buildings, the history of Lagos and all that. So kind of like just architecture, associational life and all that, basically, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. And in a wonderful moment of serendipity, both you and Mr. Adeola are both Floriat. Yes, and I can claim it because my father and my brother were also Floriat as well. So all of us are here up school. So I think that the topics that you touched in your keynote address, I think that if you live in Lagos, if you love Lagos, it's heartbreaking actually. It's heartbreaking for me to see the buildings around Bamboshe, Odunlami, Igboshire, to see them either disappear completely or to be allowed to just decay. About a month ago, I was lucky enough to go on a walk. The Afro-Brazilians had a festival day, and we went with some people who are here in the audience, and we went on a walk around, and it's heartbreaking to see how these houses have gone. And it's like we don't respect the history. We don't respect that if we could channel and understand what these houses represent, the history that they represent, the tourism opportunity that they represent, that those areas should be perhaps pedestrianized, that you perhaps don't have to keep everything inside, but at least keep the facade, have shops. I mean, if you look at pictures of places like Bayo, it looks exactly like how old Lagos used to look. And if we do continue on the path you have shown us, if we don't do a U-turn, it'll be unlivable. And not that this is it distresses me when you say, oh, Lagos is a difficult city, it's hard, it's chaotic, and it is all those things, but it need not be. So back to you, sir. What's the one thing you think we should and can address individually? Let's not even talk, because I think as well, there's a limit to, oh, government should do. What can we as individuals do?
I think that the problem has gone beyond the individual. So what the individual should do is to put effort into defining a solution so that the solution can be sold to those who have the authority and the capacity to solve the problem. And I'll give you an example. If in the olden days, if you had a family of 20 children, the 15 of them could sacrifice to send the 5 to school. So if we have an overwhelming problem of managing Lagos, one of the things I like to see is if we can carve out a 1 kilometer radius from Tinubu and keep it sane. It doesn't mean that the rest is okay, but there's a reference point that you can always go to and say, this is what a good place looks like. In other words, take Tinubu Fountain, take 1 kilometer radius and make it sane. Walkways, pedestrians, no downfall, make it sane. That's doable. Perhaps if people start seeing what a sane place can look like, perhaps they can begin to believe it is possible, perhaps.
Perhaps, and back to that suggestion, it's like, for instance, like with the kekes, okay? I think that if a 1 kilometer radius from there, if it was only pedestrians and kekes, it wouldn't be as, they wouldn't be as annoying because they would be the shuttle service.
Building control within that 1 kilometer radius will be stricter than everywhere because we're using it as a model. You know that you don't have capacity to accommodate 20 million people, but the 100,000 people who live here, they might pay a fortune for it. It's like wanting to live in Fifth Avenue. You might pay for it, but you will know that you are preserving and you are a reference point because we have lost all our benchmarks. There is nowhere you go that is a reference point of what is good practice in Lagos anymore. Ikoyi is now being densified every day. It's being densified. Once you densify it, it's a question of time before you bring in public transport. Once you bring in public transport, it's a question of time because you put in the traders and hawkers and beggars. So it's a decay. So you must preserve some so that you can benchmark them while you go and control the fundamentals. The fundamentals is the population and the lack of productivity. We think we're innovative. GDP is population times productivity. We have the population, but we don't have the productivity. And that's why our GDP is ridiculous. A person like Kelechi in the US, his productivity rating will probably be what? 100,000 pounds, 200,000 pounds per annum. But what will it be here? So when they now take all of us and multiply, we fail. So the building blocks are usually clear. Too much of our economics is a measurement issue rather than problem-solving issue. They are measuring, they're comparing, but that's not the issue. The issue is tangible suggestions that we can implement that works.
Homegrown.
Totally.
You've made, I want to pick up on a comment that you made, how it could be the Fifth Avenue, okay? Now, because I know from your Instagram and your blog, you do a lot of walking around these spaces. So has it ever dawned on you that really those areas behind like Bamboshe, Kakawa, they were high-end places. They weren't what they look like now. I mean, Darosha's house was there, our multimillionaire. Churchill Vaughan's house was there. Dorothy's house was there. These were our multimillionaires of those days. Now, does it occur to you sometimes, and how do you feel about the fact that you're going around, you're preserving the history of these places, but amongst your peers, does it seem as if you're just on your own?
Yeah, I think about that a lot. Because I think when I started, I think a few people, even my peers, I think 1 or 2 came to me and they're like, oh, you get tired, don't worry. Because they're like, history is for like older people, the older generation and all that. And then they're like, well, you get tired, Nigeria is not the country. But I think there are many times when I drop the pen because I'm just like, I'm tired. But I think the thing that kind of like still pushes me is the fact that it's not, for me sometimes, it's not more about, because so many buildings have been demolished and Lagos Island is basically like favelas of Brazil, literally, it is. And I'm just like, okay, preserving information, photographs, videos as well. And then, like you said, if it's something as well that with these references we can use to implement things like the Tinubu Square 1 kilometer radius, and then seeing if it's something that can also expand as well. Because like he also mentioned during his keynote speech, they started from Idumagbo, you said then Yaba, then Surulere and all that. So if it's something that with references to these old images and all that, they can start with the Tinubu Square 1 kilometer radius. You can see if it's probable for extending to Popo Aguda, Isaleko, and so many other places as well. Because I remember the reclamation and expansion was by the Lagos Executive Development Board, and then they made sure that, okay, it's not just one area. And it's funny because there were a lot of experts, not just architects and engineers. They also brought in medical officers as well. It was basically literally almost every profession was involved in it. And then literally, so I just think that if there are more efforts that are tangible, we can see, I think it can kind of like just make people more interested, and then kind of like also not, I don't want to use the word support, but also be involved. Yeah.
You've said something that I think is really, really quite important, where you mentioned that people your age seem to think that history is for old people. History, if it's only for old people, then how will young people learn from the stories and the experiences that history teaches? And at what point do you think young people can begin to be involved in history? How can it, and I think I'll take this question back to you, because you've just written a book, which is a form of history. Did you write it for yourself, for, you know, us old people? Did you write it for your children and grandchildren? Did you, and I hope you will give some back to King's College. And and how do you think you are going to make this book accessible in a way that young people will find it interesting?
Well, I thought you were going to put the question to Kelechi because he's the young one, but since, that's right. I think the thing is that history, when you're young, you think it's just a story. But the point is that it stays with you. And then as you grow up and as you mature, you keep drawing on it. But not while it is, not when you're 12 or 13 or 14. In fact, what needs to be done when you're 12, 13, 14 is to make history interesting so that you are not seriously pondering national issues. No. Oh, so this is what happened to Dosumo. So this is what happened to Akitoye. So Kosoko fought for this. Pelewura did this. Mrs. Rasom Kuti did this. That's what history should be for to the young. When we were studying history at the 13, 14, 15, we were studying European history. So we knew Second World War, we knew Mussolini, but we knew the story and it stays with us up till now. The story of Nigeria, they told us, was that Manco Park discovered the Niger. And that's as if there were no people living on the Niger before Manco Park came. So we do need to know the story. If you don't know the story, we will make the same mistakes over and over and over again. Older people reminisce and sometimes forget. They make it sound as if Lagos was very good. We enjoyed our youths, and probably you're enjoying your own youths, but it didn't mean that the problems of Lagos, of overpopulation, we used to have a health inspection, making sure that people did things. We had paid latrine, and that's what was done. So sometimes we forget that. So we do need to teach people history, even when they haven't learned to appreciate its long-term value.
Thank you. So Tell me, when you bore your friends with, oh gosh, did you know that when their eyes glaze over, how do you find it within you to push at them? No, you must know, you must know. How?
I think I try to put in their faces as much as I can, because on my Twitter, my personal Twitter, I mostly talk about discovering some information, some old photograph. So as much as I don't get in interactions on my own personal Twitter, sometimes I think that at least maybe somebody can be passing by, my friend, and then they probably just learn one or two things. One-on-one, sometimes I have some conversations with my friends, and then even though they might not be 100% interested, I think, like he said, somehow one or two informations might be ingrained in them. On the history page that I manage, what's the name? The Facade Nigeria on Instagram, where I
follow it.
Document.
Do you have your phones out? Follow it. Say it again. Say it again.
Facade Nigeria, THEFACADENIGRIA, Facade Nigeria. So where I document historical events, historic architecture as well. I think at first I had a lot of younger population. In between, I started getting an older population, but I think at the point now, I have a lot of younger population, which I would say is a testament that some people are very much interested. They might not show it in, how social media comments and all, but sometimes when I put out some information, someone comes into the DM and is like, oh, this is my great-grandfather. Oh, my grandmother told me she lived here. Oh, this, that. I think I remember a building that I think was on Tokumbo, but just by Oshodi. It was recently demolished. I think it was sometime early this year. And then someone, I think she's in her 30s, and then she was like, oh, my grandmother, actually, even before it was demolished, there was a time I posted it last year, and then she was like, oh, my grandmother said she lived in this building, this, that. And then when I posted that it was demolished, she was like, no, I have to rush. And then she was like, oh, wow, the building has been demolished. So I think I try as much as possible to keep on putting out the information that I put there, the buildings, photographs of events, people, portraits and all that, and then their biographies and all. Because as much as I might think that people are not reading or learning, once or twice when people come into the DM or thereabouts and they're like, oh, this is that, I kind of like understand that it might not be the entirety of the followers, but there are a certain number of people who are kind of like interested, and somehow, somewhere, if somebody else, it doesn't necessarily have to be me that brings up a project or thereabouts, and then they might kind of like get involved one way or the other.
Okay. Okay, so I obviously have a personal relationship with the history of Lagos. You can tell from my name. Gomez, what you said, I'm one of the ones who form, right? But I'm going to ask a question that I think the fact that your heritage is not from Lagos, okay? But the fact that you are fascinated by its history, I think that it shows that we are Nigerian, that I think we've moved past if you are from a place, you cannot be interested in another place. Do people of your heritage sometimes say to you, what's your own?
I was going to give an example. Someone, I had a conversation with someone, a friend, early this year, and then he's Igbo as well. And then he's like, why are you not documenting Igbo history? And I'm like, well, this is what I know I want to document. If you want to do that, you're free to do it. There's no gatekeeping. And then even with what I'm doing, there are so many other people older than me that who even know more information than me. So it's basically that, oh, this is what I'm interested in. And then if you want to do that, that's fine. So I think that sometimes when they come, I'm just like, well, this is actually just what I'm really interested in. There's nothing too deep about it, actually. It's just that the history is very fascinating. And then it's something I'm glued to because I went to King's College as well. So it's something that is in Grady Hammond's house. I must prove that I know this. So it's something that ingrained in me while growing up. So I spent 6 years in King's College. So like being close to Lagos history itself. So I'm just really interested, nothing too really deep about it.
I'm going to take questions. Do we have any? No?
Far back.
Far back. Okay. Yes. I'd like to. Okay. Right at the back. Okay. Do we have a volunteer who can take the mic? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Orakubo. I'm a hospitality consultant, by the way. I just wanted to say how proud, and it's not a question, but it's more just how proud I am to come for something like this. I found myself going on YouTube for years, 20, 30, well, I'm 30, but years anyways, going on YouTube, writing Lagos in the 60s, 70s, 30s, looking 70s, 80s, and looking if there are people that would comment, say, oh, I'm proud of this and whatnot. Then I do follow the facade, by the way, following for a while. I don't follow one step, I followed back anyways. But anyways, yeah, it's really just very informative, and I'm glad to see younger people in my generation just coming here. So I'm one of the people that are quote unquote boring. I like to follow these kind of things. And Mr. Bayo, you mentioned something very key. It's the market demand. The market demand does determine the future, but I hope that we can all come together, and get the Lagos back. I hope we can make a Lagos where there's a proper city plan. You can't just have a gas station beside your house. You can't just have so that stuff. But yeah, it's not a question, and it's just, I'm really just happy to be here. It's really amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for hosting the session and of course for hosting the panel. I have a very simple anecdote and a very simple question. Over 20 years or 15 years from, actually 11 years, in 2007, was in a panel like this where a senior executive, won't name him, is now late of blessed memory, mentioned that each time they place a transformer anywhere in Nigeria, like Engineer Adeola said, within 6 months, it's overwhelmed by demand. 11 years later, 2018, similar situation, a client in Lagos building an IPP realized that 80 people move to Lagos every hour. Satellite imagery, cell phone activations, and so on. So this was, again, data being collected outside the country and telling us, like you said, people keep moving. So in the last 4 years, you can do the math, August 2018 to now, that's, even if the numbers halved during COVID, 500 people every day are moving on foot, by plane, and so on. So 3 questions: energy, the capital that drives people moving here, and the infrastructure that goes with it. And the last anecdote is Tinubu Square. So there's a picture, which some of you may have seen, of the 1950s or 1960s Tinubu. I was there less than 2 weeks ago. So the order that goes through there is still there. But if you build all the way out to Mowe or Isheri, close to Oshodi, that axis, you will somehow, between the energy and the infrastructure, have to create as many iterations of that order. So what does the private sector do? Where there's a 20-year plan for Lagos, 2013 to 2033, literally. But what we see on the map is different from what we're seeing on the road. Between those 3 axes, energy, infrastructure, and finance, what does the private sector do? Thank you.
I'm not sure I understand the question, but I'll make the best I can of it. My fundamental issue is that there are many factors that the private sector cannot control, too many, that the individual cannot control, which was the question I was asked earlier. What can the individual do? And therefore, it is what the individual can do is what Kelechi is doing, is what this forum is doing, making sure that we raise awareness of the issue, make as much noise about it as you can. That's right, but I have found that it is not sufficient unless we propose solutions. Because when you have finished complaining to a governor or a senator or a president, what does it then do if you haven't joined him in creating the solution? And that is the innovation that we need here. Housing is an opportunity. And therefore, to make sure that we can build houses at less than 5 million or whatever figure we choose is the responsibility of you and I in that industry. We can choose to milk it and do the 100 million house and therefore sell it because there are enough people to buy it and mint money and buy other houses in other places. But I worked with an architect some 20, 30 years ago. One of his younger architects is in this crowd. And all he was trying to do was to say, why can't we build affordable housing? Nobody is taking that challenge, but that's the responsibility of the private sector. Why can't we build affordable housing? When a Nigerian says, I want to start a business, it means he wants to import machines. He wants to import raw materials. He wants to import everything under the sun. But all his sale is local. So it is a net export of capital. It doesn't matter how much money he makes. I import lace and I sell and I make money and my business has grown. But it's a net export.
Because we're not
making things to go out.
Yes.
So all the business, if you are making food and all your ingredients are imported and it's all 100% consumed locally, it is a net export of our money. You are not growing.
It's like chocolate.
That's right. Yeah, basically that's what it is. So we as individuals need this knowledge because we are not bad people. We are normal people. No, really, yeah, we are just normal, everyday people who need to survive, who need to live. And therefore, if the discourse is not proposing solutions and is just complaining and condemning and blaming, it's a dead end. The only conversation that is worth having is the one that proposes solution. Diagnosis is a requirement to propose solution. So even if the diagnosis feels bad and dire, as long as it's followed by solution to improve it, then it's been worth it. No, we all jointly and severally owe it to make this country work.
Do you have hope? We are, for lack of a better word, yes. But the mess that has been created, yes, it's, this is not where the solutions should be coming from. It's your generation. How, really, I can't say enough. If your generation is not thinking about what went before, the tendency is that they're going to replicate the same mistakes. How can we help your generation become interested? Or are we just saying, oh, these ones don't know anything? And is that also a wrong approach?
I think, because I think I don't remember how many times history has been removed from the national curriculum. And also for the fact that what's actually interesting is that in King's College, I didn't take history as a course, as a subject, but I went to history class. Okay. I took government. So it was either government or history, but somehow I was in history class. And then I think the history that they were teaching at that point, I don't even think there was even Lagos history. It was Usman Danfodio, Queen Amina, and all that. Oyo Empire, literally, just like literally around cultural lines. And but no history of where you actually, not even where my school is, yeah. Lagos itself, Lagos State. And it's actually quite interesting because even the school doesn't even like, at least, even if there's a particular day for like, oh, history day for like, let the students know about the school's history and even the state's history as well. There's nothing like that. And I think because now it's everywhere that the history has been brought back to the curriculum. But now the question now is, what is in the curriculum? Who is going to determine what is going to be in the curriculum? And are the teachers qualified to teach? Because I know that, I don't know how far back, decades back, you had training institutes for teachers. So I don't know if the Lagos State government has that, and then if there's going to be provision for that before history is taken back into schools. Because if now that it's back and then they put it back, it's the same with Madam Fodio, Queen Amina, and all that they are going to teach. So if there's diversity in teaching this, it doesn't necessarily have to be voluminous. It can literally just be timelines. You take different parts, Southwest, you take Lagos, you take Southeast, take different regions, and then also Lagos especially as well. And then you make sure that the information that you're putting out is properly researched. And then somehow, it might not be all students I think, I'm not trying to boast, but I think I'm the only one that is more involved in history out of about 300 and something in my set. So every other person is business, this, that. And sometimes when I meet some of my mates out there, they're like, oh, I used to think this your history stuff. I'm like, I'm still doing it too. People always ask me that, are you not tired? I'm like, so if it's actually funny because some of your posts where you express your frustration. It is very frustrating because most of the people that I would say I look up to in this space are elderly people like you. There's no, I mean, you're way older than me. There's no one in my age range that I kind of like sit down with and then we're talking like this, like it's not even like a formal setting, like, oh, and then we're trying to profess solutions. I think there was a time on my Instagram that there was some, I think based on history lines now, I was like, oh, in other countries, there are historic districts. Yeah. You can have Popo Aguda district, you can have Isaleko, and then you can have that Akbobo area where Saros had. And then we don't even have historic plaques on buildings and sites. Even if it has been demolished, at least you can say, oh, this person lived here in 1920, this person built this house. Currently, there are three buildings that Herbert Macaulay designed, still standing, thankfully. There's the Doherty Villa at Campus Square, there's the Hefzibah House, and then there's another on Catholic Mission Street. Just two buildings away from the cathedral, from the Holy Cross Cathedral. I'm not sure. It's just by Tarikoka Street, just opposite the Afro-Brazilian Center. Yeah, so just three buildings. And then I think I was reading an article one time last year. I stumbled upon an article, and then I can't remember his name, but he's elderly, in his 80s or thereabouts. And he was like, oh, he grew up walking around Lagos Island, Herbert Macaulay's house, and all that. When Herbert Macaulay died, it didn't take a few years. His building was brought down. He's he's a quintessential figure in Nigerian history, not just Lagos. And if you streamline it down to Lagos, his family cuts across almost every corner of Lagos, both the Brazilian quarters and also the Sierra Leoneans as well. And what happened to his building after he died? It didn't take a few years and then it was gone. How many people know that Herbert Macaulay lived in Lagos Island all his life? He was born on Broad Street. Literally, just off Kakawa. And then imagine, and then young people go to the market, Balogun. I go to the market sometimes, but then when I'm walking down, you see some fragments of building. There's a Taiwo Lowo cenotaph. Yes. When young people just pass there, you see young guys. Oh, come on, Mandila's building is next to Taiwo Lowo cenotaph. How many young people that pass and know that? Oh, what is this and this and that? And all of those are the pennies. Literally, we don't have historical markers. We don't have even digitized as well. We don't have plaques as well, because in other countries you have historic plaques. And then, so these are pointers that, these are little solutions that can also kind of like point to like a larger solution. Like he said, the 1 kilometer Tinubu square radius is something that can evolve into a proper historic district. Yes. Lagos Island, to be very honest, right from time, of the opinion that Lagos Island should be largely pedestrianized. I don't know why cars and buses should ply through Lagos Island. The streets are tiny. They were made for horses. Literally. Yes. And tiny carriages. Even carriages didn't even go into inner street. It was Broad Street and the Marina. Yeah. The only thing that could go into inner street was the tram. Yeah, which is no longer there. You can't even find fragments of the tram. The tram went round Lagos Island. But in other cities, you have trams that have dated 400 years. But what happened? Kekes that can't even navigate into inner streets and all that. So you should have historic districts. Lagos Island should be largely pedestrianized. You shouldn't have buses and kekes moving in anyhow. It is a disaster, literally. And even with the houses that are even now springing up, it just feels like everything is now choked. So even if, okay, now someone has, a developer has brought up a 3 or 4 story building where, like he mentioned, you can have in one room 30 people. You don't even have a historical marker or a plaque where you say, oh, this is where this person lived in 1920. This is where this person lived. I think there's even a plaque in the UK where Fela lived when he was there. So if imagine even where Fela lived, I think it was on the mainland as well. There's no historical marker. There's no plaque. There was a building on opposite Onikon Health Center. And then there was a particular time just next to the Onikon house. And then there was a particular time that a plaque was put up. And there was like, oh, this is a historic site, blah, 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 blah. I think 3 weeks, not up to 3 weeks after I was passing, and then the building was down, they removed the plaque. And the plaque was by the Lagos State government. That land is still empty. If you go there, the land is still empty, opposite Onikon Health Center. So it's really a disaster. It's not that, sometimes it's not as if people in government don't even know about some of these solutions, but it is just that I would say they are not even interested. They don't see the value for it. You have historic districts, historical plaques and all that. So these are simple solutions and then evolving into the 1 kilometer radius and so many other things, basically. Thank you.
I think Kelechi has made some really good points. I think one thing I would just like to add is, and it's sort of a drum I tend to beat, is our history is not brought out for us to feel and touch. It's sort of hidden away in sacred libraries. And so what happens is that we don't understand that it's important or that it's even there. I mean, just to take King's College, it had such a major role in the development of the independence movement. So the students should understand that. They should understand the impetus and the effect of the 1944 riot and how that led to the general strike and NCNC and all that. So, but anyway, any more questions because we are out of time?
Good evening.
Okay, where are you?
Yeah.
Sorry, where are you?
Okay, I need to start.
Okay, so after you, then Lawan, and then the person over there.
All right. Good evening. I just want to say I'm a fangirling you, Madam Gomez. It's you. And I just want to start by thanking everybody on the panel, from Mr. Bayo to Kelechi. Everything you said, I feel like you made my job very easy. And it might sound like I'm digressing, but it's in the spirit of,
You need to tell us your job.
I'm a policy and research analyst with Capedian. So in the spirit of like proposing solutions, and when Mr. Bayo talked about, history not being, I think, it was Kelechi that talked about history not being part of our curriculum. And I was like, this again, let me just give like the soft landing. This might sound like I'm digressing, but I am not. The real solution is for everybody here to participate in politics. Haha. Yeah, I feel like when you were going round and round, I was like, if you do not participate in politics, then it's like we'll just continue to talk and nothing is going to change. And I remember again when you were talking about how, for example, Macaulay's house was demolished. It's like if a government that knows like the value of what that building stands to gain in terms of like tourism and hospitality, I think participating in politics is really the solution. And it's just not just participating on like the surface level in terms of like, oh, we're going to vote or we're going to do this. It's like in joining, political parties, because as we know it, using the federal or the presidential primaries as the example, where using the delegate system, we saw, for example, how it was the delegates that selected, supplied the candidates were able to vote. So imagine if everybody here is like involved in, say, a political, or you participate in a political party. It's like you sort of are involved in like the supply of the candidates that are going out. So we don't have to start choosing the worst of the worst from the start. It's like we already participate from that like ground level. We know who is going to be our candidate. And I think for me, that's like the most important solution. Why I think people who are in government, who are involved in policy, should be part of this panel. Because if we're going to make Lagos, then we need to involve them and force them to do, so to say, in quotes, our will. So yeah, thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Lawan Adams. I run a tourism company called Loving Lagos. It's interesting. I'll start with Kelechi. I'm sure I don't think we've ever met. And it's interesting to know that he actually inspired me to start Loving Lagos, because I used to follow his Instagram and his other social media. And it's just that passion that he showed. And I started my own business. I was like, if this young man can do this, I mean, what else? And so you can imagine what you have done. You have led us to preserve, to protect two houses in Lagos Island. And we've been sharing that. We've been sharing that message. So even without you knowing, and I'm saying this because, I mean, Aduke has been on you as in, why do you? So maybe this could help you sleep better at night, that without you even knowing, you have inspired somebody and now you started a chain reaction. So, so that's a lot of credit to you. And then on the issue of how do we move Lagos forward? I think Mr. Adeola has said it all. It's a tough task and it's going to involve government. But I think I have seen people in this room that have made a difference, from the chairman of the trust. Yes, he's someone that is so into modern day architecture. And it's such a contrast when you look at the young man that is into history and the older man that is into modern architecture. And I think there's an opportunity there, really, because you look at Lagos from two different perspectives that are very interesting ends. And by the time you join everybody here as well, everybody here obviously is here because they've got this passion. There's passion and people that make a livelihood from it. When it's passion that drives you, when you say it's your city, we've been everywhere, we travel every day, we've been there, but we still come back here. People keep asking, you have a house in London, why don't you stay there? No, this is where it is for me. It's not about the money, it's just where I feel that it's home. And we must be able to continue to say that story. So for me, and I asked this question earlier before this session started, that maybe part of the solution would be if we paint a picture of what we think that Lagos of the future should be, just like the young lady with the policy angle mentioned. If there's a picture that is not necessarily formal, not necessarily from government, and everybody has this expectation that, you know, Kingsway Road one day will be all like Manhattan, and it's gradually getting there. What's that project called? Eco Atlantic, yes, if it fulfills what it's meant to be, we all know what that is. And we take projects like that and, you know, we add that together. And obviously all the policies and all the things that needs to be in there as well. I think it will go a very long way, and you just don't know. The answer might be here, not necessarily with government, you know. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Aduke. I am an urban designer. I work with Fabulous Urban, which is a research and design agency. And he has very interestingly asked the same question that I wanted to ask, which is, what is the image of the city that we want? We see so many depictions of glass box towers and manicured boulevards. And, you know, these are very much imported solutions. You know, they look like Dubai, they look like New York. Is this our reality? What is the urbanity that we want to create for ourselves? And I think this is a question that architects and planners and everyone here really needs to answer in our private practices as a collective, as a community, in academia. I think that's very important. In my own experience, I just want to talk about this briefly. We have tried a number of approaches on trying to achieve this future that we want. We go into a community. We've tried this 1 kilometer, although not 1 kilometer, but like coming from outside, going in and trying to solve the problems, you know, imputing infrastructure, putting in this, solving this problem here and there. We find that it doesn't really work. And we're experimenting and we're trying new ways. And I think it's very interesting that this conversation is happening. What we are currently working on now, what we're trying to explore now, is that maybe it's not about the objects, the physical manifestation of solutions. Maybe it's about people, maybe it's about processes. And this is how we're trying to explore that. So, but anyways, these are my few thoughts on the discourse so far.
Thank you. My name is Sam Adeleke. I run a tour company in Lagos. And my question is to Mr. Adeola. Interestingly, I posted a short clip of your speech online and someone said, is that not Mr. Adeola's brother? That I went Mola and all that. So I was like, okay, interesting. Now, why did I bring that up? Because you mentioned a solution earlier about that specifically touching on we putting together a solution, a grand picture presenting to government. Now, this question is to you in the course of your experience, because you probably have a brother who is a senior elite in Nigeria. The kind of things he has started, the things he controls in government and also in the banking sector. Have you attempted this personally because of your filial relations? And what challenges have you faced? Because to be honest, everyone here is probably one step away from a governor, from a commissioner. For some of us have direct access. And when I come for meetings like this, I like us to be very specific about your experience, what you have done, the challenges you have, so that those of us here, as we're growing in the career ladder, if we need to go through another angle, because if the people here have direct access to those in government and things are not changing, what can we do differently? That's one. Second, she mentioned earlier about addressing the elephant in the room, and that is the coming election. What would you propose as a viable alternative for everyone here to vote for. Why? Now, you might not have to mention names because in a few months, we have an opportunity to change the tide. I once interned in the fiscal planning, Ministry of Urban and Fiscal Planning Development in Ikeja. So I was in government for like 12 months and following them around and seeing how things are done. And after my time there, I said, oh, never, I can't work in this kind of environment because it didn't align with my values. So if a government has been in power since 1999 to now, and we are still not addressing the fact that these are the same people that will probably implement the solutions we are presenting or we intend to propose, what would you, as an elder statesman who is a bridge between the past and the future, propose that we do when we step out of here? Those are my two questions. Thank you.
Just before you answer the questions, I'd just like to throw out two examples, Stockholm and Singapore. So Stockholm in the 1960s had the bright idea that their government would erect glass steel buildings. And the artists and the creative people and the building professionals got together and they lobbied the government such that there's an area in Stockholm called, if I recall, Ganglastan. And Ganglastan is one of the few places in the world where you can now see 11th century architecture. 11th century, not 19th that we are destroying. 11th. Singapore. Again, this was a bit later in the 80s under, what's his name? The famous one. He too, let's modernize, build. Again, the private sector got together. They kept Orchard Street and all that central area. Those two places in places that are both at opposite sides of the world kept the essence of the culture, the traditions of the people, and that the places where the tourists going to those two cities go to. Now, in Ganglastan, yes, the buildings are there. The streets, you say the streets in Lagos are small. Those ones are tiny. You can imagine medieval streets. But there are restaurants behind the original facades. There are things that can be done. And yes, you can't keep everything, but enough should be kept so that we have, one, an understanding, two, we have a connection to the past. Because if you tell stories, but you can't show this is what this was, this is what was done here, the stories just go in one ear and out the other. It's like science fiction. So I just wanted to contribute that, and I'm going to give the hard question again to, in fact, I'm going to share the questions. Okay. I'd like you to say, what can be done in terms of approaching the people who are in power? And I'm going to ask you to address the questions on young people getting into government.
Okay, thank you. The last gentleman, I like the question that goes straight and takes one on. So thanks for taking me on. One, Fola was not in government, has never been. So I'm not sure what you want me to do, to tell government. So I guess he's influential, yeah. I don't think Fola has more access to government than you and I. I think that you create the power that you have, and the power of the idea is bigger than the power of the person. Kelechi has just demonstrated that. It started in a very little way, and he's just doing his own thing and putting something of value out there. And I don't know who his father or uncle, or I don't know that he has reached out to that, because we cannot use the recipe that we say doesn't work as the recipe that we want to use to make it work. If you premise it on influence peddling, then it's the wrong premise, because somewhere along that line is going to let you down when you don't sing the person's song again. I'm not running away from the responsibility to do it, but personalizing it to a person. It's Fola today, it's Bola Tinubu tomorrow, it is Atiku the next day. No. The power of the idea, the power of the passion, and the power of the commitment should be superior to the power of the person that you know. We should be able to rise above that. And that's my conviction, that it is the power of the idea that should be there. To the lady who says we should all, no, there's no nation where everybody is a politician. It is impossible. There is a class of people who are politicians. What must be there is that the ideas must be there for you to sell to them, to persuade them. If people are not writing books, if they're not creating things, if they're not providing solutions, and they're all busy campaigning, then what will they do? People who campaign don't think. They're just thinking of winning elections at that point in time. It's only after they have won the election, by whatever means, that they will then say, what will I do? You and I, some will be in the campaign room, some will want to be commissioners, some of us will just want to advise them, some of us will just want to propose solutions for them. I think it is in the diversity of roles that is the solution. We cannot all, we should all, and we don't all need to be party carrying politicians. And we've seen that even in countries that have had democracy for 200 years, you can see that it can easily be destabilized, whether it's in the UK, or it's in France, or it's in Italy, or it's in the US. We are seeing that these things don't endure unless the people themselves hold it. Please stay in politics, because we need you there, so that when we want to talk to you, you are there. But we need to stay here, so that when you want to bounce an idea off us, we are there to bounce the idea with you. I think we need everybody in the different roles: architects, lawyers, engineers, sociologists, politicians. We need everybody. Absolutely. In fact, all of them must be writers at the end of the day. Kelechi, it is lonely up there. They will never clap for you. No, it just doesn't happen. The only thing that they clap for is when you are successful. When somebody gives you an award, when you then become the role model. Darwin was a laid-back person who changed the world. Einstein was not a socialite. He wasn't applauded. So don't worry, the applause will come in the success that you achieve. And it's already coming, because there's name recognition, there's value add. Please take history of Amina seriously. Take history of Wilberforce seriously. We cannot be selective about history. History is the totality of what has gone before. It is not the one that is immediate or whatever. It is consequence. What happened? How did she reign? What did she do? Where did she fail? How did the empire rise? How did the empire fail? How did it impact on the quality of the people? So all history is important. As long the one that says Mongol Park discovered Niger is a distortion of history. That is not a history. But I think that there are so many things we need to know. There's no applause. There's just a commitment. And the satisfaction is from within. When I was writing this book, it took me 2.5 years. But you know what? 90% of people who will buy this book will not read it. I can tell you that. Just for the asking. They mean well, they're my friends, they love me, they care, but they won't read it. But we are laughing because it's the truth. But it is there for posterity. It is there because it needs to be there. When somebody says, where is your photograph? It is there because it needs to be there. We haven't sold 1,000 of these books, not 1,000. It is difficult. And I'm saying even those who have bought, When I asked, have you read it? He was smile. I read the preface, you know. But that is the reality. So your satisfaction comes from within. It comes from within. And by sharing these experiences, please discover where you are adding value and continue to add value there. Interesting enough, about a year ago, I went to somebody in government and said, let's do work in Lagos. Let's plan work in Lagos. They said, but they haven't got back to it. This has reawakened that discourse. I mean, we need to think for them. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do. We all have become so personal in our achievements that we don't want to invest anymore. It is the house, it's the Gucci watch, it is the whatever. But that is the way of the world. Those who make changes are just 1%. Don't worry about the others who are not, they don't make changes. But if you have selected yourself as one of those who will make the changes, please go on and fight for it. Thank you.
I think my question was on young people getting involved or interested.
Activism, yes.
How?
I mean, what would be the solution to have them interested so they don't just leave? Because if you all leave,
yeah.
What will we do?
Says he's going to the land of the white man. You know, Kurumi was a play that was staged in 1970, I think, Kurumi. And one of the proverbs in it was that the cow says he's going to the land of the white man. He said, let him go. When he gets there, what will he become? Corn beef. All those who are migrating, I'm sad that they are. But 90% of them are going to regret it. That is the truth. Now, all the social media are now laying off. All the IT companies are laying off people. Who is going to be the first victim of the layoff? Believe me, the wave that took you there, when it doesn't need you anymore, the Windrush in the UK, they went to import them 50 years ago to come and build the tunnel for them. What's happening today? They don't want them anymore. And when you then live in the UK, your first day, there's light, there's water, there's this. Okay, all right. After 3 months, you find that you have no savings, not a single copper. All your salary goes into paying your bills. Because that's the life they live there. And you start wondering, meanwhile, they are in a trap. You can't come back home because you don't want to tell Kelechi that it didn't work. So you are there, dissatisfied. By the time you are 40 years old and you are due to be a consultant at a doctor and they say there's no vacancy because you don't speak the language, because the accent is wrong or whatever, it's a dead end. The fact that we are making them go, we are guilty. But the fact that they are going, especially the educated one, they're misinformed. And it's just sad because most Nigerians in the abroad want to come back. Those who have been there for at least 20 years want to come back. And that's why they're complaining. You people make Nigeria better so that we can come back. You know what I tell them? I don't owe you that. You yourself come. We owe it to do it together. If you don't want to come back, stay there now. Go on driving cab in the evening. And yeah, it's okay. Thank you.
I think I don't want to say if it's a difficult task or, and I don't want it to seem like, oh, it has to be appealing, because sometimes history is not necessarily appealing. It's just, many people might not even be, oh, they see a building. I might be very fascinated because I also study as well, neoclassical architecture. So like I can see a building, I step out, and I see a building, I'm like, oh, the columns, it's this classical order, it's this, the balconies, the balustrades and all that. But for so many other people, it might not necessarily be appealing. And even on the onset, it might not also be appealing. But I think maybe we can use different channels, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the government. Maybe the documentary Journey of an African Colony. I think if we have more of that, because on Netflix, most of what I watch are historical dramas, but the only, or historical film basically, but the only one on Nigeria, which they've added another one now, and the third as well. The only three that I can reference is The Journey of an African Colony, the movie on Queen Amina, and then Death and the King's Horseman. Only three. Okay, and then Anipo. Yeah. Just came out. Yes. Anikulapo as well. So that's 4. But I can count more than how many. I've watched Versailles. I've watched Reign, Queen Mary, Queen of Scots, and all that. So I think we should use, because we're a digital generation, so I think we can use social media, digital films, series, books as well that can also be digitized as well, because so many young people, they might not want to read hard copies as well. And so just use different mediums as well. And I think also digital museums as well, because many young people don't even want to, I don't know how many young people go to the National Museum in Lagos Island, basically. So it's just using different mediums to kind of like catch their attention one way or the other, so that you can just rope them in. So I think with that, it can spur them to do research on their own and maybe get involved, be interested, and sponsor or start a project here and there.
Yeah, sorry, can I just add to that comment? Yes. My name is Shola Akitunde. I'm also one of the trustees at Open House Lagos. I just wanted to add that one of the ways, well, from my own experience, that I've been able to, or when I'm still young, but when I was younger, I was able to survive as somebody trying to be like an activist for cultural heritage and whatnot, was mentorship. I was the one who, approached Engineer Adeola that, I had worked with him on a project in 2010 or 2009, when I was still in my master's year, because I had a mentor, Professor Olumide Olusoya, who was, again, another, permit me to say, poetic license, another mad professor that just wanted to solve affordable housing, and he just wouldn't do any other thing since he graduated from the US. He came back, and for the last 40 years, that's what he's been doing. And it culminated in the Jorabadia project, which I was also the project architect for. So without mentorship, it's difficult for a young person to, because it's madness, really. Activism is madness. For you to say, I'm going to change this thing, you're going to run mad and come back and run mad again and go back. And the things that balance you are your mentors. Another mentor I had is Professor John Godwin. We all know him. He's the reason why I joined Legacy and did 10 years of madness. All the people in NCMM, all the people in Ministry of Information and Culture, they all know me, that when it comes to cultural heritage, please just run away from Shola, because they know that this guy is going to shout down everybody and they're going to make sure they put history back. They just put history back after 13 years. There was a law in Lagos. We were part of the activism for that. But all of this would have been impossible without the mentors I had in Legacy, Uncle Desmond, Majekudumi, Mrs. Fisher, all those, heavyweights, So I think what he was also alluding to was having, what stops Mr. Fola Adeola from being on this panel as well and saying his own mind about what GTB has done, because GTB has also invested in culture. And that's his own response to his question, that we've done GT Bank Food Fair, we've done GT Fashion Weekend, we have the best architecture for banks. That's also part of cultural heritage. It has invested in the young architects. They now design better because they've seen better buildings. In the 80s, there was no fine bank building. I'm saying that. I was born 1986. I saw all ugly. They were all ugly. Even UBA headquarters in Marina, what's that? It's not a building. It's nothing. And that was what we had. So GTB started that revolution. And so that's something for them to say. So I think we all need to find mentors. I think it's the mentorship that is the key. And as we grow old, we then need to mentor people behind us, because Kelechi also benefited from me and my other colleagues who became mentors for him in Legacy. He joined Legacy, he became an executive. And now that we're running away, there are some younger people who've taken over, and he too will definitely create something. He already has mentees, I'm sure, because it's the nature of activism. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to end now by thanking my panel, Mr. Adeola, Kelechi, and I'd like to thank all of you, and I'd like to thank Open House, and I'm going to hand over to Aduke now, and so please a round of applause for my panel. Thank you.
If the panelists can please stand up just for a group photograph, and then we're going to wrap up soon. No, just for a group photograph. Yeah, yeah. Oh. Thank you. Can we give them a round of applause just as they get returned to their seats? Thank you. It's been an honor, and also it's been quite enjoyable. You know, I'm supposed to make sure that we keep to time, and I looked at the time and I realized that, goodness, it was such an enjoyable conversation that was moderated by Ms. Gomez. And I think that one thing that has come to me as we continue is the sense that making Lagos is perhaps also about remaking Lagosians, and the sense of how pilots are important, but it's good to look at feasibility as well, and how we can critically think of solutions. What I've liked about this session is that it's not to discuss the problems of Nigeria or the problems of Lagos, but to look at how do we start to really create a sense of place and a sense of belonging. A lot of the work I do is in tourism development, and it's important that you make the space and the destination, otherwise people aren't going to partake in it. So day one has been completed, as you've seen. The festival has 2 more days that are to go. Tomorrow, you can see it on the screen there. We're back here at 12 o'clock, and we start with another introduction, an exciting panel looking at regeneration and reclamation, as well as another panel looking at redefinition and decolonization in Nigerian museum practice. If you would like more information, you can check our website, as well as our social media page, OHL, Open House Lagos, and Open House Lagos, that's the website. So again, I think it's important that we shout out to our sponsors and thank them very much for supporting us. So that's Gracefield Island, Yinka Shonibare Foundation, Alliance Française, and the Guest Artist Space Foundation. Open House, as you can read more information if you want to, it's so important, and part of what Open House does, right? It's volunteer run and has been having festivals since 2016. It's not for profit, and all of us that are part of Open House really do it because of the passion that we have in terms of seeing how Lagos can be made. I first heard about Open House from the Open House London, and it was very exciting to come to Nigeria and see that there were a group of people that were trying to make a change. And so part of what I do as a volunteer is sit on the advisory board. I'm not an architect, but again, all of us have different parts in our practice to see how we can contribute. So again, I think it's important that we ask, or I will ask the members of the advisory board who are present here to just stand up for recognition. And so I'll start with Chuka Ihono, who is the chairman board of trustees. He's an architect. Papa Omotayo isn't here, is not in the country, but he's also on the board of trustees, as well as Olamide Udoma Ejo, but let's clap for them, for the recording and for those on Zoom. And then we have the advisory board, of which, like I mentioned, I'm a member, on the trustees, because Shola was already standing, Shola is also a member of the board of trustees and has been very instrumental, as he has mentioned, in ensuring that a lot of what we do goes out to different organizations and that we make change. Please keep standing. Okay, you don't want to keep standing so that the photographer can document all of us standing. And then we have Ms. Gomez, Ms. Aduke Gomez, who's also a member of the advisory board. And then we have Stephanie Adisa, who is a member of the advisory board, and Charlotte Langhorst, who isn't with us here today, but she's a member of the advisory board. And it goes back to what Engineer Adeola said, which is that all of us that live in Lagos are Lagosians, and it's important that we see that we have a role to play. But none of this will happen without our volunteers, as well as our project manager, who is Odawai. Please stand up, Kandu. And our 2 volunteers who are wearing the vest, as well as Jimo, please stand up as well, just for recognition. So again, these are the people here. There's so much that is happening behind the scene. But again, if you want to be part of the solution to some of the challenges that you see, like Engineer Adeola has told us, as well as Kelechi has shown us, you don't have to wait for anybody. You really can start to make this change. You may sit down now. Thank you. And it's important that we don't get tired and that we can contribute either by supporting in terms of our time, partnering as our sponsors and partners have done, or also donating, and the information to donate can be given to you if you would like to do so. But just to know that we can start small, we can start and be impactful, and that we really are making history even as we're doing what we're doing in every little way. And so basically we have this tomorrow, and then can you go to what we have on Sunday, please? So on Sunday, we're here tomorrow, and then on Sunday, it's a different location. It's 58 Raymond Njoku Street, where you meet at 12 to depart for the tours at 12:30. We can't have an open house Lagos festival without having building tours. And we have 6 buildings that we're going to tour, including the Polo Club and JOI House. And then we return back to 58 Raymond Njoku, and then depart at 5 for a tour of Gas Foundation Oniru. And they have very kindly given us a space also for reception and networking in their courtyard. So thank you so much again for spending your Friday night with us. I know that, pardon? Oh yes, thank you very much for spending your Friday night with us. I know that this isn't, what's the word? Someone mentioned to me that, goodness, are we going to talk about Lagos on a Friday evening? But I think that we have seen that talking about Lagos can be very constructive, can also be enjoyable, as well as it's our responsibility, because if we don't do it, who is going to do it? I'm going to close before we go for our networking and reception with this quote that I heard today. And I really like it, that the power of the idea is greater than the power of the person. I think it's so important. As you can tell, I'm a huge fan of Engineer Adeola. I think it's so important that we remember this, and we also remember that we are all part of this creating of history. Thank you very much. Yeah, so the networking and reception will happen outside, right? Yeah. So please, we're officially closed, but you can go to the reception for drinks and for refreshments, as well as networking. Thank you. Sorry, please, can the members of the organizing team and the panelists and the speakers please just stay behind for a group picture? Thank you. And we'll just do this very quickly. Thank you, and have a lovely weekend, everyone. See you tomorrow. See you outside, and also tomorrow.
Let me see, I'll go the other way. I think it's the same. Yes, because we remind you of it.